Thanks everyone for joining our webinar today. We are going to get started now with Beyond the Dashboard, Navigating the Agentic Disruption in Retail. Your speakers for today are Noam Paransky, myself, and Roopesh Nair. Noam, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Noam Paransky, investor and advisor with Intelo, former Chief Omni and Innovation Officer at Tapestry, former CDO at Tapestry, former head of digital at Gap Inc., and longtime retail practitioner and consultant before that.
Thanks, Noam. Roopesh? Roopesh, you're on mute.
Hey everyone, I'm Roopesh. I'm the co-CEO of Intelo, kind of responsible for product and engineering, and have experience being in digital merchandising and kind of been in AI technology over the past 2 decades, and looking to share some of the experience.
Thanks, Roopesh. And I'm Jeff Fish. I'm the co-CEO of Intelo as well. And I'm responsible for everything that Roopesh is not responsible for. And it's great to talk to you today, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We'll have 3 different sections to cover. We'll have the macro shift, which will be covered by Noam, talking a little bit about the turning point in 2026, and hopefully while you're all here. Then we'll jump into collaborative intelligence and really talk about the shift from legacy AI to generative AI to really partnering with agents. And then Roopesh will take us through Intelo and how we've deployed agents across merchandising and planning. We will do a quick demo, and then we'll have some time for live Q&A. Please hold your questions, and we'll get started now.
Okay, so let's talk about this as a topic. Hopefully most of you join because you're merchandising and planning practitioners or advisors, or you're just interested in agentic technology or other related things. But as interesting as it might be to build your own agent to order your Starbucks in the morning, and I admit that for many that's probably super important, here we're talking about for retailers and brands probably the most important area of their business, right? Talking about the decision of what to carry and how much to buy for an organization. And that is the single largest utilizer of cash in any retailer or brand. So it's just critically important to get that right. If we can move to the next slide, Jeff. Here we've got some sizing from an independent firm, but it's a huge opportunity. We all know it and we live it, right? We have the clear issue of stockouts. Everyone has those, and everyone is trying to get their arms around hopefully a KPI around lost sales. Although many don't have a good KPI around lost sales, and strongly recommend orienting that as a primary KPI. And then we know the impact of overstocks. Everyone is dealing with some level of markdowns. Markdowns are lost profit and cash, and stockouts are wasted opportunity to grow and drive your business. You're disappointing a consumer at that point. And so we know that there's imbalance. So it's not a question of do you need to solve, and it's not a question of whether or not technology or AI specifically should be part of the answer. It is simply how and when, and we're going to get into that here today. The traditional model, everyone here I think on this webinar knows the deal. You've got data from disparate systems. Most of the work is being done in Excel. So there's a lot of time being developed to cobble together data, manipulate data. In Excel, it's a ubiquitous tool. People know how to use it. It's omnipresent, but it's not always on and integrated and connected to everything else. You have multiple merchants or planners working in disparate spreadsheets, disconnected from finance, right? So whenever teams are working in spreadsheets, you don't know the true up situation. You don't have visibility. You're not making holistically optimal decisions, but that's where the work's traditionally being done in these areas. And then by the time a plan is baked, it's already gone stale, right? If we move on to the next slide. So, what have been the different kind of eras and solutions and approaches to this situation? And I'm old enough to have lived through all of this, right? So the first era was spreadsheets, getting the data in the one place, having methodologies and approaches and metrics that teams were driving for, getting the data into the hands of smart people. But there's only so much that people can see and do. The next era was the big, BI and dashboard era. Even more data being brought together, lots of dashboards, a lot of information, but very little optimization in the process, right? Then you get into the predictive analytics era, which I lived through in my last role. So probably about 8 years ago, we brought in a leading kind of predictive analytics era vendor. And that was a huge step change forward from the dashboards and business intelligence era, where you've got kind of big models, kind of more black box, more automation, but still a lot of work being done in spreadsheets. And you have a gap in adoption and trust, right? How to pressure test the models, how to work with the models, very difficult. What you have is what you get. A lot of customized models, and a lot of companies kind of bursting at the seams, trying to maintain many different models for many different customers. And now we're entering this agentic era, and which is why I'm here with the Intelo folks who've built the best agentic solution in the space, clearly and bar none. But as you see what an agentic solution gives you, it's kind of the best of all three eras. It is the power of predictive analytics, the visibility of dashboards and BI, and the ubiquity of the data and the clarity of kind of where do you stand, and the ability to control and manipulate and adapt to the spreadsheet era. And all of that is coming together in the one coherent form factor and tool that allows you to adapt, optimize, really get that insight to action flywheel going that has been so difficult for people to get their arms around, and really drive the optimization holistically around a disparate group of people in real time. If we move to the next. And so, what is happening? What is going on out in the marketplace, right? So a lot of talk about agentic, right? So the market is growing. I think what we're going to see more specifically to folks here is that applying agentic AI against the most important use cases in your organization is going to drive faster, clearer, higher ROI than legacy solutions that take a long time to have speed to value and very hard to adopt. You're seeing more and more enterprise apps, including agents. But I think the watch out here is that simply an agent on top of a legacy solution, or is it a natively built agentic solution? And then for those who've deployed agentic AI, who's achieving ROI, right? And that's the trick. There's a lot of conversations. There's that MIT study that 95% of AI projects fail. What's amazing here with well-architected native agentic solutions, you can get up and running extremely quickly, prove out use cases and value extremely quickly. It is very powerful, very easy to prove the value. And this is where the market is going. And then, merchants, planners, allocators, these are some of the best paid, best educated people in your organization. And they exist in the organization to drive sales, return on cash, right? Grow your business, drive your strategy. Because, for most of us, what do people buy? They buy physical goods, right? They're also buying the dream on the marketing side, but a big piece of it is the purchasing the physical goods. And so today, the amount of time that these people on your teams are able to spend on really driving the strategy and the execution of the business is low. They spend the majority of their time prepping, manipulating, data. That's not what these people should be doing. It is about driving efficiency and, most importantly, effectiveness in the MP&A processes to ultimately allow insight, action, and strategy to overlap and to drive business outcomes to delight the customer by having what you want, when you need it, where you need it. And that's the fundamental vision, and Agentic AI allows that to happen faster and more demonstrably than any of the legacy approaches. Jeff, back to you.
Thanks, Noam. So Noam set it up really well. Things are moving really quickly. If we were sitting here in 2022, we'd be talking about how cool ChatGPT is, but what are we going to do with it? And from 2022 to 2024, a lot of time was spent around, how do we write the perfect prompt? How do we leverage the LLM? 2025 was really the year that organizations really started to pick up how to think about an agentic strategy or even an agentic workload. And 2026 is where the inflection point has happened. So if we go back to the first couple of years of generative AI, there was a lot of testing. There was a lot of, let's do a pilot, let's see what happens. And I think many of you probably did that. And you went out and hired prompt engineers within your organizations. And certainly those of us that have been in software for a long time, it was the most highly recruited type of role that there was. And everybody was focusing on building out prompts. And there were some really great outcomes and there were some really bad outcomes. Noam mentioned the MIT study that's been widely shared over the last year or so. And a lot of it came from those first couple of years of testing and trying to find out, within an organization, how are you going to really leverage generative AI? And the reality was that it might have been a little early for the enterprise. It was great for startups, companies like ours using LLMs and integrating LLMs into workflows were great. But as you start to go, larger and larger organizations, that was a challenge. And then the agentic layer started to come to fruition, the ability to reason with an LLM, and then the ability to build agents on top of that. And that really started to came to pass last year. And we went generally available last year, and we came to market with the idea that you can leverage an agent as a teammate, and leveraging that teammate, you can interact with it, you could get better decisions, you can always be in the loop and always be able to reason with that teammate. And that's worked really well, not just for us in merchandising and planning, but for agents that are across the retail spectrum and certainly much broader than retail, really every vertical. But 2026 is a time where those agents are getting a lot smarter, not just because of data, but because of usage, because of interactions at the user level, and then leveraging up that data across multiple types of individuals and multiple roles, and then harnessing that data to ultimately become autonomous and work alongside your teams to make your team better and to make your team grow over time without having to add additional headcount. And that's where we are now. So we're in a new wave. That new wave is truly a partnership between agents working alongside you and your teammates that you have today. And if we think about how that's gone in the merchandising and planning space, or just retail in general, for years, you had a dashboard, right? It could be a dashboard that you built in-house, it could be a dashboard that you subscribed to, it could have been that is your entire system was a dashboard, and you interacted with that dashboard, and you were successful in many ways. And in many ways, you weren't. And Noam was talking about how merchants and planners and allocators spend so much time with spreadsheets, and really that's because they're customizable. And being able to leverage those spreadsheets are kind of your own personal dashboard, but not scalable, right? So how do you augment that? How do you think about that? Then you started getting used to using chatbots or copilots. And I think that, thanks to ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, everybody feels comfortable with that. And everybody is now comfortable leveraging those chatbots and those copilots. but they still love their dashboards, and those dashboards can't go away. And now you have the ability to leverage agents, and this could be across the retail spectrum, no matter what space you're in, and certainly broader than that. But in the merchandising and planning space, how do you leverage an agent or a teammate that allows you to have that chatbot experience, allows you to have that dashboard experience, but then ultimately brings it all up to a capability that's like hiring a new person on your team, or bringing that person into your organization to solve for a very specific skill set. And that's where we are today. So these agents have great domain specialization. They can run autonomously if you want them to. They can certainly always have human in the loop, but then they still have that ability to fall back on the dashboard functions or those co-pilot capabilities with the chatbot. And leveraging agents are thinking about how do you leverage a new hire. So if you leverage a new hire and you train them only how to do allocation, or only how to build an assortment, or only how to do a rebalancing within that in-season optimization, or you're hiring them for long-range planning or core planning around merchandising financial plan, they'll be great at that, right? And if you train them and they've went to school for it and they understand your business, they'll come in and they will be a fantastic individual with your team over time. But what if you had a team of people that you could hire? What if you had 6, 7, 8, 12, 15 people that you could bring on board that were all great at what they did, and they can all work together and they can interact seamlessly with the team that you already have to make that team better? That's where a team of agents really comes into play. That team of agents allows for you to deliver discovery, allows you to crunch large amounts of data, and then leverage the true strategic thinking of a merchandising financial planning team and the creativity that exists working alongside this team of agents. And that's what we'll get into. And this is really where an agent network delivers the most possible value. Now, agents could be scary, and AI is moving really fast. We just think we're in 2026. In 2022, before ChatGPT came out, no one really knew what generative AI could really do. It was around, it certainly existed, but it never really had taken off. And from 2022 to 2024, it came on the scene and everybody was testing and using. And now 2025, 2026, it's starting to become part of your day-to-day life. But can you trust it? Can you actually believe what it says? And legacy AI or ML has been around for years. I was working with ML. Roopesh and Noam have been working with ML for 15, 20 years. We've been around a long time. And many of you have as well. I think the challenge that you always had was, is it right? Can we do better? My gut feeling and my gut instinct is better. Can we deliver an outcome that we would expect from that ML or from even that generative AI? And the answer a lot of the times was no. A lot of the times the gut feeling or the ability to do that custom VLOOKUP with your spreadsheet that you know and trust and love was a better outcome. And that's why many of you still do that today. But now with collaborative intelligence and the ability to leverage autonomous agents, not only will you get the scale of AI, but you'll also get that ability to interact with it, that ability to question it, the ability to understand the reasoning on why it delivered what it delivered. And that's what we've built. That's what the other players that are building out agentic systems in life sciences or in banking and certainly broader retail, that's what they're building as well. And it really has to be narrow focused. It needs to be able to deliver a very specific set of outcomes. It needs to truly give you a reason on why it did what it did. And if you question it, it should be able to make those changes on the fly with you and alongside you. And ultimately, once you build up that trust, work autonomously with you to get better outcomes. With that, I will hand it off to Roopesh to talk a little bit about how we apply that to merchandising and planning. Roopesh, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So just to connect the dots, like Noam talked about overall, like the trends. Jeff talked a little bit about how collaborative intelligence is really helping people build agent teams and really create true outcomes. And I'm kind of moving to the point, like, how are we really doing it at Intelo, specifically for merchandising and planning? As Jeff mentioned, it's very critical to think about when you build agents, think about specialized areas, really difficult to solve, and then think about it and how to solve for it. And that's exactly what we have done. So Jeff, you go to the next slide. So we think about what we built as a merchant AI engine and not just a planning software. Noam initially talked about how you kind of could bring the best of breed of Excel and dashboards and conversations and intuition into one setup. And that's exactly what we've done with the merchant AI. It's plug and play, so it can actually plug into what is existing, but then slowly kind of replace some of the things which you have pain points on, and keep things which you do not have a pain point on as is, right? So you don't need to change the entire thing. Things are working for you, keep it as is, plug and change the other things. It's easy to install, and then it's natively built and trained on real workflows of organizations around how merchants think, how planners think, how buyers think, how do they work with finance, how this all connects together, right? And eventually, when we think about agents, it's all about kind of creating outcomes, right? Agents are nothing but a group of people, a group of tools which drives an outcome. So every agent you will see as I work through it is tied to one or many outcomes, and then constraints or aspects the agent needs to think about while it's driving towards the outcome. That's exactly how the agents have been built, and hence it's always thinking about the outcomes and not about other things outside that box. Right. So if you go to the next slide, Jeff. So in the context of merchandise planning, of course, those who have been in the merchandise planning area kind of know we start all the way from kind of thinking about whether it's a long range plan or an annual plan, thinking about the business plan overall. This could be sometimes finance doing it, sometimes basically finance and merchants together doing it, or sometimes planner. So it could be a combination of that, right? And now, how does an AI assistant help with that, or AI agent help with that? And then from there, how does it connect to your merchandise financial plan? Because in many cases, the business planning is done, then you hand it over to merchandise financial planning, and then sometimes it's not connected, but it's the same set of data which flows across all the agent teams. So from business planning, you're seamlessly kind of connecting to the agents who are there, who are kind of figuring out a class level plan or a category level plan or a subcategory level plan, or whatever level you're doing, your planners are doing the merchandise financial plan at, and then being able to connect back and forth with the business plan, right? And from there, as you get into planning the assortment, and some of this happens in parallel, right? It's not a sequential process, as you all know. It happens in parallel, where planner might be kind of really figuring out the open to buy, and then the merchandisers and buyers might be really figuring out the assortment in parallel, right? So kind of as you think about what items are coming, what are you bringing, what new items are you bringing to market, what style colors are going to what store, what sizes do I need to order, and how many of those, all those areas, and thinking about clusters and what type of clusters needs to exist, and all those things is a pretty complex process, which has to be pretty tied to what you do in merchandise financial planning and eventually to business planning, right? So that's where, as we were talking about, the agents which are there, these agents then talk to the merchandise financial planning agents and hand off seamlessly. And then eventually, when you get to in season, how do we really perform once the buys have been completed, or the buys are the flows are coming through? How does the initial allocation happen in cases in luxury? Of course, you want to be right always, but sometimes you're not right. In that case, how do you rebalance? And then, continuously look at, where you're losing sale, and kind of tuning your entire agent ecosystem and working with that team, to make things happen for you and to drive the business value we were talking about in the previous slide. Right? So if you go to the next slide. So let's go break down one by one, right? As we think about, I think business planning is, mostly kind of pretty simple. So let's kind of start breaking down starting from the MFP as to how some of the agents we have kind of starts helping these pieces, right? So inside MFP itself, we have many agents who are working with each other at the end of the day to kind of give you certain value, right? So today you might be spending a lot of time trying to figure out the seed plans and trying to figure out like what happened in LY, what happened in LY, what should I have, for my receipts for this piece, and all those things. When you start building, you kind of need to bring your previous data set and really figure out what's going on. What the AI-powered seed plans do is they kind of use your previous data set and all the other signals which is available to it to really build out kind of from bottom up, but a top-down view of the MFP, which then kind of ensures that you can then work on it, create versions of it, work between planners and buyers and things like that to kind of ensure that it kind of summarizes everything together. I'll show quickly towards the end of this how that works so that you can visualize what I'm talking about here. And then, of course, it does real-time calculations as you're kind of changing, hey, I want to change this by 10%. You're making a top-level change. It's automatically calculating everything towards the bottom, cascading up and down, being able to really then think about what trends could impact me, right? I could really come in and think about, hey, I'm doing a planning for my, apparel or let's say women's tops, and what trends could impact that, and really being able to bring in those trends and then kind of being able to connect that to the MFP, which today in many cases you don't sometimes get to because you're already kind of so much buried in trying to getting to the MFP itself that you sometimes don't even get to look at some of the data, right? Now, even if you get that time to look at the data, you're overwhelmed with that data and to what to look at. So being able to bring that data quickly and being able to have that conversation. So at the end of the day, and being able to kind of reason with the MFP agent to be able to make those changes. Go to the next slide, Jeff. Now, the MFP agent, as we were talking about, connects to the assortment planning agent. We talked a little bit about it as I was summarizing it. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but just to give you a little bit, like, you look at the assortment performance, how it performed, then you kind of look at your clusters or your doors. You think about what items are coming in. You kind of forecast out what item is going to do well in what cluster and all that thing, all those aspects, and then eventually reconcile it and build out your buy plans and flows and things like that. All that kind of being able to kind of, one of the issues you have is different people are doing this in the process sometimes. You're doing your buy plan on one side, you're kind of trying to kind of make the judgment on sizes on the other side, and those needs to sync real time. All those things, agents are doing it for you, right? You're kind of getting the basics, you're talking to it, and then agents are kind of doing a lot of the sync and also helping you with some of the decisions you're making. If you go to the next slide, Jeff. Finally, in season, I think we got into that as we were talking through this, but what I will do is, again, once you basically get the buy in place, at the end of the day, it's trying to get the right product at the right place and ensuring that when a customer walks into the door or online, if you have a product in inventory, it is at the right place, right? One is kind of ordering the right product, but having that product and having it in a store where the customers are area where customers not going to have demand is the worst thing we can do, right? So how do you kind of do that? How do you kind of figure that out and balance that out? And then how do you kind of take all this data and push it back to the business plan, push it back to the MFP, push it back to your assortment performance, is all part of thinking about agents and how they work with each other, right? So maybe before I so it's all about that loop, right? That kind of end-to-end process, starting from the core business plan to assortment, all of those things working in congruence to make things happen. And the good news, though, is you can plug one in and see how it works with your existing team. So agents can work with agents, but agents can also work with all of us. And hence, if you have a problem with rebalancing, you can just plug in the rebalancing agent. If you have a problem with cluster management, you can just plug in the cluster management. If you have a problem with creating a size optimization or a buy plan, you can just kind of plug in that agent, right? So, and then look at how it works with the humans and then make decisions from there. So that's a great part of it. So if you go to the next slide, Jeff, I think I need to, before maybe I can get to a quick demo. So what I would do is, Jeff, I'm going to take control from you before that. So this is one way, the platform can come to life for a particular company, right? So you might have a bunch of agents you might have kind of added on to the agent network. You might then come in and say, you know what, let's take that whole merchandise financial planning use case we were talking about and the seed MFP use case we were talking about. You can come in and say, you know what, I want to create MFP seed for 2027. You might be working on a specific season or might be working on the entire year. Let's say I'm working on the entire year for now. It basically pretty much kind of does what it does. It kind of brings all the data from LY, It brings the relevant data sources, kind of builds the insights, and then pretty much builds the seed MFP for you on the fly, right? It summarizes all that stuff for you, and then it builds the seed MFP for you, which pretty much, you can kind of, if you look at what you saw here, it used all the data which we used from LLY, which we provided to the agent, and it created out your seed MFP right on the fly. And now you can kind of go in and edit, update it. You can download a spreadsheet, as we were talking about. We all love that. We can kind of work on it offline. We can come back, upload it from here, and continue where you left off with the agent. You can do edits like at a bulk level. You can say, you know what, I want to edit a metric. I want to edit a specific metric, do a percentage and update it, and the entire update kind of cascades. You could do updates just like you did in your spreadsheet and say, I want to get it to 10%, and the entire update cascades down into all the hierarchies below, right? If you would look at it. And then the great news is it's not a black box. So at any point, you want to ask a question as to how did you come up with this number? You can just say, explain this, or ask a question the way you would ask it. And then the agent will reason with you, kind of tell you how it came up with the different numbers. And then you can continue to ask questions like you would challenge each other, like you would talk to each other, right? And then let's say, for example, we talked about the macro trend scenario. If, let's say I want to kind of quickly come in and say, you know what, that's great. I've built my MFP, but I want to know what macro trends can impact my MFP, right? Let's say I just want to consider for everything. And basically it starts scanning all the macro trends, which is nothing but a bunch of news, which you've already fed to the agent, and then starts looking at things which might be impacting your specific category of planning or your specific product hierarchy of planning. And then you can start looking at it and saying, all right, let me try to apply this trend and see what the impact would be. And that trend then gets applied. It looks at all the different metrics and just shows you, again, this is all about, it is at the end of the day, kind of taking that feedback from you and ensuring that it works with you. And then once you have this, you can kind of, go through the process just like you would have done in the past. Now, this is a human in loop setup. You can always have it set up in a way that it runs automatically and you get alerts when it runs as pieces. Or you could set it up in a way where you can actually have plans which are created and you can go through those plans as you go through stuff, right? So that's quickly on how the agent works, right? And you can imagine similarly like MFP, it works in the context of allocation, replenishments, rebalancing, assortment planning when you're doing item planning, all the different use cases we talked about. So when you think about what the action could be from here, right? Think about your current state, because at the end of the day, your teams are spending a lot of time on data management, right? Playing with data. Is that the right value for your team's time, right? Think about that. Think more in context of what problems I need to solve for my team, and then we can easily bring in the agent, right? So, and whether you bring an agent from Intelo or honestly build it yourself or get it from anywhere, think about what problem you're solving, what goals you're looking at, right? Start with the high impact areas. Look at, for example, where is the largest ROI? Am I doing the buys right? And maybe the issue is only the way I am allocating, or is it the other way around, right? And ensure that you basically provide this capability to your existing teams so that they can use it, and the agents can get used to how the teams work, and then they help the team work with each other. And then, which then relates to kind of a point where you put something in, it will give you immediate value, but then eventually the goal is about really being able to kind of grow with your team, right? So as your team kind of works with the agent, every decision your team is making is kind of building into the agent's merchant AI, which then helps every planner in your team make a better decision, or every merchant in your team make a better decision. And of course, not just based on the decision, but also based on the outcome which those decisions are creating. That loop is going back into the merchant AI, right? So how do you build the flywheel early so that you're ensuring that the aspects are getting compounded? I think that's where we, if you go to the next slide, Jeff, I believe we move on to questions from here.
That is the last slide, Roopesh.
Yep.
It does seem like we seem to be having some issues with questions.
See a bunch of people raising their hand. Mauro, do you want to just allow everyone in?
Can you go ahead and let everyone in?
Yeah, let me see.
I seem to be having an issue with allowing them to speak.
Yeah, no, I added Mauro and Michael had questions. I think I have added them. Mauro, do you want to go ask your question? I think if you want to take yourself off mute.
Okay.
No.
Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes,
There
we
you
can
go.
hear you. Yeah.
Maybe can you see me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Hello. So thank you so much for your introduction. Very interesting. My question is this. Is there any possibility that agents have doubts about the action to take, and so they need to ask for clarification to human?
Always. I think that's the point on the human in loop aspect, right? Where agents clarify, and if you're letting the agents run autonomously also.
Sorry, Roopesh. Not the human who ask, but the agent who ask to the human.
Yeah, both ways, right?
Okay, that was clear.
So
Sorry.
when an agent is making a decision, let's say it has a question and it cannot move forward, it would create an alert. Let's say it's running autonomously without you looking at it, it would create an alert for the human, and the human then needs to come in and look at it and say, what is the answer I have for this, right? But if you're running it the other way around, where when a human asks a question, the same way, agent has a question, it will just ask it back saying, were you trying to do this or that? Very similar to how you would see that. Very similar to how you would see in a Gemini or whatever. But there is also the capability where agent might be running in the background, Mauro, and it might have a question, and it might send an alert to the user to say, hey, what do you want me to do here? Because I can't proceed forward based on the confidence level you have set for me.
And another question, if I can.
Sure.
Yeah. The second question is this. Is there a sort of course, I think, is there a sort of RACI matrix? I mean, for each agent, which is the responsible, the accountable, who is the manager of that agent, and so on. So in the case, let's say in other words, if the agent makes a mistake, is there a responsible for that mistake?
Yeah, so
There's a
there's a race. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to say that there's a set of constraints set around every agent. The agent can only work within those constraints. Anything can't happen outside of those constraints, but if they did, they would surface up. And then there's a set of KPIs for every agent.
Yeah, and to your question, Mauro, that's exactly how the agents are also configured. We set a RACI metrics for the agent itself when the agent comes in, right? So what are you responsible for, in the sense you can make, in some cases, decisions as compared to an accountable, as compared to where you need to consult, all those things. That's exactly what agent configuration is, a bunch of those RACI metrics being configured, along with, of course, all the tools being available to the agent through MCP, along with all the prompts which are on top of it, right? That's basically nothing but the agent built, and also the data we are feeding into it. That's exactly what an agent is.
I want to be mindful of time. If we could go to the next question,
Yeah.
Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah.
Hey, how are you guys today? Thank you all for the presentation. Where my question comes in, and I know you guys are geared more toward the retailer side at this point in time. And Jeff, I think you kind of hit on it for a second there. So with all of these agents, you can, let's say it's a Kroger or a Target or Walmart, whatever it may be, you're going to have different buyers and different personalities and KPIs for each of those different buyers. And I think you alluded to this. So you can set up these agents to develop these quote unquote buyer personas.
We preset them with buyer personas.
Okay.
And the personas that we've deployed so far are very much focused on specialty retail and luxury retail.
Yep.
The types of retailers that you had just mentioned are coming.
Yep.
But absolutely, those personas will exist.
Awesome. Thank you.
If we could go next to Patricia. Patricia, I think you're on mute.
I was on mute. Took me a little bit to connect my microphone. Thank you so much for your presentation. Where were you guys when I was in leadership teams at retail? This would have been so helpful. But I guess my question is a little bit more aligned with who are you targeting as your like entry point client in the company. So AI and technology is very much needed to reduce frictions and optimize so many processes and budgets and stuff in retail, as you well mentioned. However, adoption at the store level, which is like the end consumer who's actually has that direct impact on all these KPIs that then feed into the AI agent. It takes a long time to either adopt, understand, and then retrain like the teams there. So I guess my question is like, is there a version or a way of like store teams on the ground to actually use this tool in a way that may not require all the technical knowledge that it needs, that it requires to use, dashboards and agents and all these sorts of different things that the program needs.
Yeah, Patricia, it's a great question. And the answer is we very much have factored in stores into all of the use cases, and the agents are role-based. So the role of, let's say, a store manager or someone who's working in the store warehouse would have a role that would be specifically for them, which is very easily trained. And also you don't just have to access it from the web like Roopesh was showing you. If a store is using Microsoft Teams or Slack or another chat application that's easier for them with a very limited view, I would say for a store manager was doing something like rebalancing or needed to focus on inventory coming in and needed just a report sent to them via Teams or Slacks, that can absolutely be done and is being done for some of our customers today.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. If we go to the next question, I think it was Jocelyn.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
I can hear.
Okay, great. Hi guys, thanks. This is a great webinar. I've heard a lot of the themes before. One of the things I really stuck with was when you pointed out basically getting all of the knowledge and all of your liability out of merchants' heads. I think you said it a little more eloquently than that, but you know what I mean, with the AI. But my question is more about when you're looking at our client being a specialty retailer is looking at coming on board. My experience is the biggest challenge is getting their data up to speed and getting everything you need to be able to actually start the implementation. How are you guys seeing that as a friction point and as a challenge, and how are you overcoming that? Are you working with other agencies? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, great question. And I think there was a similar question on the chat also from Link. So Jocelyn, what we are seeing is the good news is agents are helping build that data connections also, which is great on both sides. We are working with partners, like for sure, where there are complexities in the data, where the retailers don't have a data mart or a data lake or something already built. We do work with partners who themselves use agents. So there were days when basically getting that all in place would take months or years sometimes, but now getting the data into a data lake, even if you don't have something, is not that complex. And also as you start working with agents, you don't need to solve everything. You can just create an MCP layer, a model context protocol layer on top of your data set, and then expose it to the agent, right? So that's something which our partners are doing. For example, you're like, hey, there's an ERP system and there's no visibility to that. That's fine. We have system integration partners who can build quickly MCP layer on top of that ERP, and then it is accessible to not just our agents, but every single agent who you might ever build in your ecosystem, right? So this is a problem which everyone has to tackle, but the good news is there are system integration implementers who are doing this and building the MCP layer, and we have worked with many of them, specifically in merchandise planning, for example. There are a few who are very specialized in merchandise planning who we work with also.
I want to thank everyone for the questions. We are going to go to the last slide because we are at time. You were a great group. Thanks so much. Thank you, Noam, for joining us. Thank you, Roopesh, for the deep understanding and question responses. We do have another webinar coming up very soon with our friends at Microsoft, and that's coming up on April 22nd. All of you that have been at this event today will get an invite for that one as well. We look forward to seeing you there, and you can always find us at Intelo.ai or find any one of us on LinkedIn. Thank you so much and have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.